Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Shady Side, for inviting me. Thank you, Lillian, for asking me. There's just a few things I want to talk about, but first, I'm a digital strategist, so I have to take your picture because you're all looking so fierce and fine. Yes! I have to tell everybody I was at Shady Side. I think the last time I was here, I was actually attending a dance concert. I'm going to set my timer because I want to make sure that I have enough time for Q&A. All right? So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about being a global citizen. And a part of why I chose that topic is because, for one, I just finished traveling all throughout Europe and different parts of Africa for the last 5 months. My family and friends kept asking, when are you coming back to Pittsburgh? When are you coming home? And I was like, I'm really not sure. I literally took a time to actually buy my return ticket. I wasn't sure if I was gonna come back. I'm just teasing. I was definitely not prepared to not come back, all right? I only had one suitcase. But I teach a lot about American history. I'm not even teaching right now. I'm actually traveling. Part of the reason is because I stopped teaching so that I could become a caregiver for my mother. She had dementia. She was a teacher as well for many, many years, and she was also an administrator at Community College of Allegheny County. And just sort of out of the blue, really, one day, I just started to kind of notice that there were different things that were pretty off and wrong, and then she was repeating herself and then sending me the same emails and then sending colleagues emails that were like over a year old and things like that. And so we discovered along the way that what we witnessed and what she was experiencing was dementia. I thought that dementia was Alzheimer's. I thought that that's what it meant. But as it turns out, I learned that there's 13 different kinds of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most popular form. But my mother had frontotemporal dementia, which is right here, as all of you astute students know. And that meant that her decline was, it was more aggressive, and her decline was very swift. And so I discovered some things, I want to say in about 2010, 2011, and then she didn't actually get diagnosed until about 2012. And it was just odd because she was working full-time the whole time. And so I say all of this because my mother was a wonderful educator and administrator, and she affected so many students and so many careers, and she launched so many careers for different students, and they came back and even upgraded their skills and got promotions and things like that. So she was beloved and throughout the city of Pittsburgh. And at the same time, I'm related to a famous playwright, August Wilson, and he is the most famous member of our family. But in Pittsburgh, the most famous member of our family is actually my mother. And so I got to the point where I just had to announce on social media that my mother had dementia because I kept running into people who didn't see her, and it was causing me to suffer over and over again, having to tell the story. You know how when something traumatic happens to you, and you just, like you tell your friends, you cry it out, you tell your parents, you cry it out, and then like word spreads around the school, and you're like, wait, I'm supposed to tell you all this like 600 times? That's not gonna happen. So I just announced it, on social media, and that led to people following the story. And they then wanted to know about her progress. So then I had to keep going and making announcements and sharing the story. And it actually ended up being a really beautiful journey for all of us. I really knew very little about dementia and Alzheimer's. I really thought that, dementia was when old people forget their keys in the house somewhere and you have to help them find it. And I was like, oh, I can do that. And I thought that dementia was when old people tell the same story over and over again, right? And they're like, baby, did I ever tell you the story about, and you're like, yes, grandma, but tell me again, right? And I was like, I can manage this. Like, I'm patient, I'm good. Oh, I was in for a very rude awakening. That is not what dementia is. And I can talk more about that, but point being, I have this great career, and I was teaching everywhere and traveling across the United States and giving talks and presentations, and I had my blog, and I'm halfway social media person, and I ended up stopping everything except for the digital part, and I just kind of shut down because my mother needed me. She needed me immediately. And even when we had to move her into the nursing home, that is when I had a very rude awakening that there are not enough healthcare and staff, and even the staff are not adequately supported in our healthcare institutions. And so I decided to just live with my mother in the nursing home. I literally was there every day from about I want to say maybe 2 p.m. to like 10 p.m. or midnight, because people who have dementia, they sundown. So I was kind of, sundowning is when the sun goes down and they go up. Their hours are switched. So basically they cut up at night, okay? So college students, if you are asked to, come and help a patient with dementia, you can have a party with them. They'll be wide awake, you know what I mean? You can be so helpful because you all stay up at night as well. So that's basically what I was doing, is that I was living with her in the nursing home, and then I would go home and go to sleep. And so my world initially was very, very large. The one that she introduced me to was very large. And then with dementia, my world got smaller and smaller, and it was just hospital, nursing home, my bedroom, my kitchen, just my bedroom, and her nursing home. And it became very, very small until she passed away August 30th of 2015. So it's been 3 years now that I have been without my mother, and she was always my best friend. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about being a global citizen is because I think she really taught me how to be a better person over and over again. And I thought that I was patient before, but caregiving tested my patience in every single way, and I became even more patient. I thought that I cared about humanity, but it took me to be in the nursing home and to actually see people struggling to drink their water, and to see that there weren't enough staff, and I'm looking at this person and I'm not really qualified to feed them or give them water and drink, but I couldn't stop myself because I knew that it might be like 30 more minutes before the staff could get around to them, you know what I mean? And so to see somebody like struggling with their spoon, you know what I mean? I'm looking around and I'm taking care of my mother, right? That's my space. That's my curated space and my acceptable space. But because of how she raised me, I just could not help these people. So I violated all types of laws, I'm sure, but I had to. So after she died, well, actually, as I was growing up, my mother took us to travel. We went to Canada as much as we could. But she, my father passed away. She became a single mother. She was raising my brother and myself. And so she always taught us about travel and about the world. And I grew up with figurines around our house that she had gathered from her own travels. And she always told me, Kimberly, when you grow up, you are going to travel throughout Europe on a Eurail pass, because that's what she did in 1968. And this is actually like her 40th anniversary of having done that. And I was like, wow, Mommy, like you traveled the world like by yourself? Like you went all throughout Europe in the 1960s? Like what? So while she was sick, we found a box of her film. I knew that she filmed herself, but I had never seen all the films. And so while she was sick, I sent the film off and I got it digitized. And I knew that because I was losing my best friend, that I was going to struggle after she passed away. And you have what's called anticipatory grief when you're a caregiver and you anticipate that you're going to grieve, and you have grief because you anticipate their death and you witness their suffering. And so I got those films, the film reels, digitized, and I had a DVD burned for myself and one for my brother, and then I just left it there, and I didn't want to watch it until after she had passed away. And sure enough, as we predicted, and as all scientists predict about the stages of grief, there was a period of time when I really couldn't get out of the bed, and so I pulled out her DVD. And, this is definitely something for all of you as young people, because we all have parents. I witnessed my mother as a woman in the world, and long before I was even a thought, all right? And oftentimes, we think that our parents are our parents. Mom, we associate her with like good things, hugs and goodness and good food and laundry and money, right? But I invite you here and now to think of your mothers in particular as women in the world. They had dreams and hopes and ideas about themselves and their lives long before you were a thought. Welcome to the world, but I want you to think about how you can give back to your mothers, and to not think of them as just your mothers who are in this space to serve you, but how you can also serve them as the women and the full women that they are. I want you to think about that, because that's a part of being a global citizen. And so when I was lying in the bed and I couldn't get out of the bed, and I watched her DVD, and I watched her as a woman in the world and traveling the world before I was a thought, and she was amazing. And then I saw her, she took my dad, which at the time was her fiance, she went around the world, and then she took my dad around the world. And like, they were amazing and fine. I felt like I was watching Beyonce and Jay-Z, you know what I mean, just traveling the world. And I was like, Mommy, I mean, look at you, look at that dress, yes, queen, you know what I mean? I was clapping, you know, I was in bed and I was like rising up, you know, and just feeling a lot better. And I decided, well, that's, you know, I've been teaching for a long time. So teaching was not an accomplishment anymore. I already earned my PhD. So getting a PhD and going back to school was not going to be an accomplishment anymore. I'm an award-winning artist, and I don't say that, you know, in vain. I'm just saying it because being a caregiver and being there for my mother is the best accomplishment I have ever done in my life. I can't even outlive it. Anything else that I do, any award that I receive, it pales in comparison to the fact that as a human being, and somebody, you know, who was like out in the world and doing things, right? I stopped what I was doing and I was there for the human being that needed me the most when she needed me the most. And so I heard that you all were having tensions about words and the N-word and the music and safe spaces. And I just want to invite you to think about respect and dignity in travel in particular. Because what I decided to do was to just walk in my mother's footsteps. I had taken her to Ghana. And we were there for a month. I had taken her to China. We were there for a month. We had a really wonderful time. But at the point when I couldn't get out of bed and I started watching the DVD and I saw her as a woman in the world, what I decided to do was to walk in her footsteps. And so I traveled to Europe and I did exactly what she said I would do, that I would travel throughout Europe on a Eurail pass, and I went from train to train to train, to country to country to country. And even though in high school, I learned Spanish as my second language, right? It was so interesting to like be in France, and I'm like, okay, boulangerie, bonjour, poulet, please. All right? And then I would wake up and I would be in another country, and all of a sudden I would hear Spanish and I would be so excited, you know, and I'd be like, hola, hola, buenos dias, hombre, mi hermanita, que bonita, right? I was like the woman, right? Because I was able to master the language and I was able to switch the cultures. And it made me think, I was talking to a man from Morocco about, so many people asked me about American politics and our elections. And so I felt like Schoolhouse Rock on tour. I was like, well, we have the judicial branch and the executive branch and the legislative branch. And I've been teaching, I mean, really, I was so proud of Schoolhouse Rock. And so I was just teaching them about what it meant, but it caused me to think about our problems and our struggles and our contested histories here in the United States. And not just over the N-word, but over, you know, race and gender and sexuality and our whole being and class. And we do have a very peculiar history around race in the United States. I want you to learn it, I want you to know it. So when we think about the use of the N-word, I want you to think beyond that it's about a word. It's really about the fact that human beings have inside and outside space. All human beings have inside and outside culture, inside and outside boundaries. When I was in high school, the Polish students made jokes about Polish people that I knew, that I was just observing. I'm not a participant, and it's not a boundary that I would cross. The Irish students did the same thing with other Irish students. The Italian students did it with Italian students. The Jewish students did it with the Jewish students, and certainly the black students did it with other black students. And why? Because each of those peoples, especially in the United States of America, has had a contested history around power and disempowerment, and particularly for African Americans around dehumanization. And even when it comes to slavery in the United States, even Europeans looked upon the United States of America and said, well, that's a very peculiar institution. And they had slavery. So I want you to think about, what is it about American history? What is it that occurred in America that would make slavery a peculiar institution, even to Europeans who were already in practice with slavery and then, you know, ended slavery before the United States? The N-word has a very long history and a very clear association with dehumanization, racial violence, literally the wiping out of towns, the wiping out of people, attacks on churches, attacks on individual people, lynching people, false accusations. It goes on and on and on. And so I know that it's hard when you struggle around the word and you struggle around spaces and boundaries, and it's like, well, why can't I be cool? It's in the music. And it is tough, right? Because African-American music is literally like the national popular music, right? Hip-hop, everywhere I go, you know what I mean? I heard like hip-hop in French. You know, I don't even know French, right? And I heard them like, do you know what I mean? And then you go to, you know, you're in Japan and they're like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my, you better work hip-hop. I mean, like literally, it's amazing. Hip hop is worldwide, right? So yes, I mean, I'm a performing artist, right? So we struggle with that, right? But I just want you to be clear that there's a saying that travel is fatal to prejudice. I want you to know about the history of hip hop. If you want to explore the N-word, I don't want you to be myopic about it. I want you to learn American history. I'm a historian. I'm a historian of American history. I know African American history, but I also know many other aspects of American history. And I want you to learn about the construction and the evolution of hip hop. I want you to know, what's the Asian American creation around hip hop? What is that? What is the relationship between Jamaica and hip hop? What's the relationship between Brazil and capoeira and breakdancing? All right? I don't want you all to struggle over a word. I want you to understand each other's histories. I definitely want you to understand African American history because I know that you don't always get it. All right? So I want us to not have to have that type of conversation, but I want you later on to tell me who created various forms of peanut butter and why you love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches so much. I want you to know who created the traffic lights, all right? I want you to know so many things. And as you travel the world and cross cultures, you don't have to necessarily do what I did or do what my mother suggested that I do, although I do suggest that. But what I suggest is that we all get out of our bubbles, right? You're here at Shady Side Academy. I don't know how many of you get escorted or you take the bus or you know, you're driven to school, but can you cross cultures in the city of Pittsburgh? Can you explore a neighborhood that you've never been in before? Can you explore literature of a culture? You can travel with your mind. All the English, you know, all your English teachers are clapping internally and they're celebrating as I'm saying this because they want to introduce you to even more literature that will take you in and around the world so that you can be a global citizen. And as I've learned, I have had to code switch. I learned different cultures literally on the spot of a dime. And the only reason why I'm able to do that, not because I master the language or master all the codes every single place I go, I don't. But I always start off with the very basic things, which is I have self-respect. And because I have self-respect, I don't believe in the myth of white supremacy, and I don't believe in the myth of black inferiority. Because I have self-respect, I know that we all have histories. We all have a story. And because I have self-respect, I respect other people and their stories and their narratives. Sometimes as I'm traveling around and I'm invited to eat with different people, sometimes I eat with a fork, other times I eat with chopsticks, and sometimes I eat with my hands. And I do it in respect to the culture that I'm in and that I'm with. I want you all to be able to switch and change and master language, literal language and also the figurative language, and know that a smile is truly transnational and can get you into many different places. And then to carry yourself with dignity and pride, and know that you represent, all of you represent your family, you represent the cultures from which you came, you represent this school. And especially because I teach on a college level, but I talk to a lot of high school students and even elementary school students, know that school is a safe space. This is where you make your mistakes. This is where you explore ideas, because out in the quote unquote real world, you can get hurt by not understanding the culture. You can literally get physically hurt or emotionally hurt or other ways that you can be harmed, because the world is not as safe as our spaces that we create. So I heard that you are some of the smartest and brightest students in the city. I believe it. You look sharp, you look fine. And so I'm so happy to be here. And I just want to remind you that travel is fatal to prejudice. Travel in your mind and physically, cross cultures in literature and with each other, cross neighborhoods take a train to New York City, and definitely, as my mother suggested, tour throughout Europe on a Eurail pass. And I certainly invite you to Africa, which is where my dress comes from, because I left Senegal I was in Senegal last week, and then I came back home to talk to you all. So thank you so much for inviting me.